In the spring of 1852, New Orleans was louder than usual. The Mississippi carried ships heavy with cotton, sugar, and human lives, and the auction blocks along Charcha and Esplanade echoed with numbers instead of names. Men were priced like horses, women were inspected like fabric, children were weighed by how long they could work before breaking. This was not unusual. What was unusual was the crowd gathering at a single auction house on a humid April morning, whispering about something they had never seen before. They did not come for strength. They did not come for obedience. They came to see beauty. The auction notice was written carefully, as if the seller feared the words themselves might cause trouble. No exaggerated claims of muscle, no promises of endurance. Only one line was underlined twice: exceptional appearance, unmatched symmetry, rare specimen. In a city that had sold human beings for over a century, the word rare still managed to stir curiosity. By dawn, wealthy planters, merchants, and even women in veiled dresses crowded the street outside the auction hall. Some came to buy, others came only to look. When he was finally brought out, the room fell into a silence so complete it frightened even the auctioneer. He was young, no more than 22. His skin was a warm bronze, unmarred by scars. His posture was straight, almost regal, as if his body refused to understand where it stood. His face caused men to stare longer than they meant to. High cheekbones, clear eyes, features so balanced that several witnesses later said it felt unnatural, as though he had been carved rather than born. He was dressed plainly, but even the rough cloth could not hide what everyone saw. This was not the beauty of health or youth alone. It was the beauty that unsettles, the kind that makes people uncomfortable with their own gaze. The auctioneer hesitated. That alone was strange. He had sold hundreds of men. Yet now, his voice faltered. He cleared his throat and announced the opening price. It was already triple the usual rate for a male field hand. No one laughed. No one objected. The bids began immediately. As the numbers climbed, something else rose in the room, a tension that had nothing to do with money. Several buyers later claimed they felt watched, though no one else stood behind them. One woman reportedly fainted. A planter from Baton Rouge abruptly withdrew, pale and shaking, muttering that the man on the block should not be owned. Such language was unheard of. Ownership was the foundation of everything in that room. The young man did not speak. He did not plead. He did not lower his eyes. He stood still, breathing evenly, as though he had already accepted an outcome no one else understood. The final bid was obscene, higher than many houses in the French Quarter, higher than entire families had ever fetched together. When the gavel fell, the room exhaled, and only then did people realize how tightly they had been holding their breath. The buyer was a man named Étienne Moreau. Moreau was not new money. His family name carried weight. Old plantations, old blood, old secrets. He owned property outside the city and a townhome near the river. He was known as a collector: books, art, rare artifacts brought from Europe and the Caribbean. He was also known for something harder to define. Servants quit without explanation. Guests described his home as beautiful but oppressive, as though the walls listened. Within hours of the auction, rumors began to spread. The young man had not been purchased to work. He had been purchased to be hidden. Moreau's household records show no assignment of labor, no tools issued, no field transfer. Instead, a single line appears in the ledger, written in an unusually careful hand, kept within the house. No reason given. No wage value assigned. It was as if the man had been removed from the system that defined his existence. Those who caught brief glimpses of him in the weeks that followed noticed strange details. He was never seen outside during the day. When he did appear at windows, servants swore the curtains were quickly drawn. He was not chained. He was not beaten. He was not even spoken to publicly. Yet no one ever saw him leave. Then the whispers changed. A maid claimed that mirrors in the house were covered, one by one, after the man arrived. A cook insisted that Moreau ordered silver removed from certain rooms. A groundskeeper swore he heard singing at night, low, wordless, echoing through the corridors. But when he followed the sound, it stopped abruptly, leaving only the sense that someone had been standing just behind him. Most unsettling of all were the reports from the doctor. Moreau was a meticulous man. He kept records of everything, including the health of those he owned. Yet when the physician was called to examine the young man, his notes were incomplete. Vital signs were listed, but with question marks beside them. Pulse, steady. Temperature, unusual. Under remarks, only one sentence was written, then crossed out so violently the paper tore. Physiology inconsistent with. The rest was unreadable. The doctor never returned. Within 6 months, 3 servants left Moreau's employ, 2 left the city entirely, 1 disappeared. No notice was filed. No reward was offered. It was as if they had been quietly erased, much like the man at the center of the house. By winter, New Orleans society noticed something else. Moreau was changing. He appeared younger. His posture straightened. His voice grew stronger. Acquaintances remarked on the clarity of his eyes, the color returning to his skin. Men half his age complained of exhaustion while he seemed invigorated. When asked about his health, he smiled and credited good order and quiet living. At the same time, no one saw the young man anymore. Not at windows, not in reflections, not even in whispers. It was as if he had dissolved into the walls of the house itself. Some assumed he had died. Others assumed he had been sold quietly, though no record supports this. In the slave markets, paper was everything. People could vanish, but money always left a trace. Here, there was none. In 1854, something happened that forced attention back onto the house. A fire broke out in a neighboring building late at night. As flames spread, residents fled into the street. From across the square, several witnesses reported seeing a figure standing at an upper window of Moreau's home. The firelight illuminated his face clearly. It was the same young man, unchanged. While others aged, burned, or panicked, he looked exactly as he had 2 years earlier. No lines, no fear, just a calm, almost sorrowful expression as he watched the chaos below. One witness later said it felt like the man was not observing the fire, but the people. By the time authorities approached the house, the window was empty. Moreau refused inspection. He cited property rights, he cited illness, he cited influence, and in New Orleans, influence often spoke louder than law. The matter was quietly dropped, but the city did not forget. Stories began to circulate with darker tones. Some claimed the young man was not fully human. Others suggested Moreau had discovered a method, ancient, forbidden, by which beauty could be preserved and transferred. The most dangerous rumors whispered that the man was not a victim, that he was the source. In 1857, Étienne Moreau died. Officially, it was peaceful. In his sleep, no struggle, no illness recorded. Yet those who prepared the body noted something unsettling. His face, though older, carried an unfamiliar serenity, almost relief, as if a burden had been lifted at the final moment. When his estate was inventoried, investigators found something far more disturbing. There was no record of the young man's death. No burial, no sale, no transfer, nothing. In the upper floor of the house, they discovered a room sealed from the inside. The walls were lined with mirrors, uncovered now, dustless, as if recently polished. In the center stood a single chair, leather worn smooth by years of use. Beneath it, the floorboards were deeply scarred, not by chains but by fingernails. On the wall, written faintly in charcoal, were words in several languages: French, Latin, and one line in English, written more clearly than the rest: "He does not age. He remembers for us." After Moreau's death, the house was sold, then sold again. Each owner reported disturbances, reflections that moved independently, footsteps in empty rooms, the feeling of being studied by something patient and enduring. Over time, mirrors cracked. Rooms were sealed. The house eventually stood empty, avoided even by those who did not believe in ghosts. As for the auction records, one page is missing, not torn, not damaged, removed cleanly. Today, historians debate whether the story is exaggeration, myth layered over cruelty, or something far stranger. What is certain is this: in a system built on owning bodies, there was one body that refused to be defined by ownership. He was bought as property. But whatever he was never possessed. And in New Orleans they still say that beauty, when caged, does not fade. It waits. After the house was sealed, city officials quietly archived the matter. New Orleans had always known how to bury uncomfortable truths beneath humidity and time, but the silence surrounding the young man did not behave like ordinary neglect. It lingered. Years later, when new clerks reviewed old property documents, several reported the same sensation, a pressure in the chest when reaching the missing auction page, as though something were warning them not to look further. One clerk, a woman named Margaret Haynes, made the mistake of asking questions aloud. She noticed that the lot number assigned to the young man had been reused, something that never happened. Lot numbers were sacred to the system. They tracked value, ownership, profit. Reusing one was like pretending a life had never existed. When she pointed this out to her supervisor, he reportedly closed the ledger and told her that some records were removed for the health of the city. Margaret resigned within a week. Before she left, she copied one detail into her personal notebook, the description line beneath the missing name. It did not list height, weight, or origin. It listed only one word: preserved. By the late 1860s, the Civil War had torn the institution of slavery apart, but it had not erased the structures that fed it. Many former plantation homes were abandoned, repurposed, or quietly looted. Moreau's house stood untouched longer than most. Locals claimed no one could stay inside for more than a few nights. Union soldiers briefly used it as quarters, then left abruptly, citing structural instability, though no damage was found. One soldier, years later, would tell a priest that during his third night in the house, he woke to find someone sitting at the foot of his bed. Not standing, not looming, just sitting, watching. He said the figure's face was beautiful in a way that made his stomach turn. Not seductive, not gentle, just impossibly calm, as though it had already watched him live and die in 1,000 different ways. When the soldier reached for his rifle, the figure spoke for the first time. Not in English, not in French, but in his own voice. The soldier fled the house barefoot and never returned. As Reconstruction reshaped the South, stories like this multiplied. They were never identical, but they shared the same core details: mirrors, silence, a man who did not age, and the overwhelming sense that he was not bound to the house, but had chosen it. Some claimed he appeared only to those who tried to claim ownership over others. Others said he emerged when cruelty was practiced casually, without thought, as it had been for generations. The most unsettling account came from an insurance inspector in 1889, sent to evaluate the property. After reports of structural decline, the inspector entered the sealed upper room. He noted that the mirrors reflected the room incorrectly, angles distorted, space appearing deeper than it was. In his report, he wrote that when he stood in the center, his reflection lagged behind him by several seconds. When he raised his hand, the reflection smiled first. He did not submit the report officially. Instead, he mailed a private letter to his brother stating, "The man they sold in 1852 is still there, and I do not believe he was ever meant to leave." By the turn of the century, the story had shifted from whispered history to something closer to folklore. Children dared each other to knock on the doors of the house at night. None waited long enough to hear an answer. Elders warned that some places absorbed injustice so deeply that time itself bent around them. They said New Orleans was full of ghosts. But this was not a ghost. Ghosts were leftovers. This was something else. In 1917, the house was finally demolished, or so the city claimed. Official documents state that the structure was unsafe and removed to make way for expansion, but photographs from the period show an empty lot with no debris, no salvage marks, no record of reclaimed materials. Contractors listed on the project denied involvement. One even swore under oath that when his crew arrived, there was nothing there to tear down. Yet neighbors insisted the house had stood the night before. After that, the appearances became rarer, but not gone. During the Harlem Renaissance, a writer passing through New Orleans mentioned meeting a man who seemed out of place in time. The man spoke softly, knew details of the city no living person should have remembered, and asked strange questions about whether people still believed they could own beauty. When the writer turned to introduce him to a friend, the man was gone. In the 1940s, a photographer developing street portraits found an extra negative in his batch, an image of a young man standing behind the subject. perfectly in focus, eyes fixed on the camera. The photographer swore no one had been there. The negative disappeared before it could be archived. By the 1960s, civil rights activists reported seeing a silent observer at rallies, never participating, never chanting, only watching. One activist described him as too calm for the anger of the moment, as though he had already seen how the story would end. And then there is the final, most troubling theory. Some historians believe the man was never imprisoned by Moreau. They believe Moreau was the one who was chosen, that the auction was not a sale but a test, that the beauty everyone witnessed was not meant to attract ownership but reveal it, that the young man allowed himself to be bid upon to see how high human cruelty would climb when tempted by perfection, and when the price was paid, the true exchange began. Moreau aged backward because he was being emptied. Strength, vitality, time itself siphoned away, not violently, but willingly surrendered by a man who believed he was gaining something rare. What he gained instead was proximity to something that remembered every injustice committed in its presence. That final inscription on the wall, he remembers for us, may not have been a warning. It may have been a confession. Today, tourists walk past the empty lot without noticing anything unusual. But some report their reflections in nearby windows looking improved, sharper, more composed. And for a moment, just a moment, they feel younger, lighter, as if something unseen has taken interest in them. Historians still debate whether the most beautiful male slave ever auctioned truly existed. But in New Orleans there are those who say beauty never forgets how it was priced, and when it remembers long enough, it learns how to collect